Greetings to all of you who are joining me today. It is an honor to be here with all the talented writers of the Florida Writers Association. I hope you find this presentation helpful. And now I will tell you a little bit about me. My name is Betty Viamontes. I was born in Havana, Cuba. I have published multiple Amazon bestsellers. For example, Waiting on Zapote Street, which is the story of my family, and it won the Latino Books into Movies Award. I am working on my 8th novel. I completed graduate studies at the University of South Florida, and I've dedicated 20 years of my life to document the stories of many families. It is important to me to bring the lives of Cubans to people around the world. I reside in Tampa, Florida with my family. And you may ask, why do I write? What prompted me to pick up a pen when I was very young and start writing the first words? It all started when I was 6 years old. Actually, this is a picture of me 3 years earlier when I lived in Havana, Cuba. My father left Cuba when I was 3 years old, which is depicted in this picture, and 3 years later, when my mother realized that she would not be able to leave Cuba, she attempted against her life. I stopped her that day. However, I exchanged my childhood for her life. Since that day, I took refuge in my writing. Writing became my escape. Only when I wrote, I felt free. So you may ask yourself, why do you write? What is your motivation? What drives you? This is very important as you're writing memoirs. As I have continued to migrate from my family story to the story of other families, this has been important for me, stepping into the shoes of those families whose stories I document. Only then will the reader be able to experience the same life that my characters are experiencing and step into their living rooms. In the next section, I will be covering different memoir writing techniques, including differentiating between a memoir and a biography, utilizing all of your senses when you write, techniques such as not start at the beginning, tease your readers with instant action. What did your characters learn about the experiences? The concepts of introspection and immersion, and also the importance of writing location and time. And you may ask, what is the difference between a memoir and a biography? I have some definitions that I found. There's another one that I do not have on the screen that is listed by Oxford Languages. A biography is an account of someone's life written by someone else. Another definition, like I show on the screen, is the story of a person's entire life. As an example, we have Eisenhower in War and Peace by Jean Edward Smith. On the other hand, a memoir is a historical account written from personal knowledge or special sources, and again, this is also found in Oxford Languages. A memoir is a story from that life. They're intimate accounts. They do not need factual accuracy, and they may contain elements of fiction. When I decided to write Waiting on Zapote Street, my mother's story, in order to make her story justice, I decided that I needed to write it in the first person, so it became a memoir. I needed to document the story from the time that she was dating my father, the time he left, the 12 years that we were separated from my father, us in Cuba and my father in the United States, and the reunification of the family and everything that happened in between. It was a period of 12 years primarily, and it was a very in-depth analysis, look at her life, her thoughts, what was happening through those years that she was alone in Cuba, raising 3 children in a socialist system. I had to do a very introspective view of the things that she went through, because what would a mother with 3 small children decide that she is going to take the step of taking her own life? That is unthinkable to me. Yet I needed to find out through the writing, through talking to other people that are still alive, the circumstances, the depression that she was going through, high blood pressure, all untreated. All of these factors and many more led to what eventually happened. Again, I cannot emphasize how important it is to get into every aspect of a person's psychic if you're going to describe events as difficult as the ones that I described in this story. It makes it far more engaging to the reader, more believable. So details are important in memory writing. Keep that in mind. It is important that when you write a memoir, you pay attention to all of your senses, sights, sounds, textures, and smells. And here's an example. In the evenings, the sweet-smelling laundry was brought indoors and made ready for ironing the next day. This is from a memoir of my early years by Julie Andrews. I also want to read to you a couple of excerpts from Waiting on Zapote Street so we can see how those senses are utilized. This is taken from chapter 1, the beginning of the end. I could smell the salt of the sea and hear waves crashing against steel on that moonless April night. The 67-foot boat, Captain J.H., battled its way through high waves with over 200 men, women, and children stuffed into it like the filling inside a rag doll. Havana's yellow lights had faded over the horizon and the winds were picking up, waving strands of my blonde hair in the cool, humid air. The concepts of introspection and immersion are key in writing memoirs. The first concept, introspection, is the attempt to figure things out. As I mentioned before, this was critical for me as I was writing my mother's story after she had passed away. I needed to understand. I started writing her story in the first person, but when I got to the chapter of her attempted suicide, I needed to put myself in her shoes, something that for someone like me is very difficult to do. I will read you an excerpt of one of the darkest chapters in this book. I caution that this might not be for all readers, so if you are a child, I would suggest that you do not listen to this section or speak to your parents, whether you are able to do so. The name of this chapter is called Boiling Point, and I'll read a little piece of it. I was in the kitchen crushing garlic when dark thoughts rushed through my head, much darker than other days. I was alone in the house and felt very tired. I had not slept for 3 days, each passing day sinking deeper into depression. The mailman had not left any letters from Rio for over a month. I missed him and my mother. I felt as if I were falling slowly into a crevice in the ocean floor and everything had gone dark. So many times I had wished I had wings to fly away from this place. Several unsuccessful visits to the immigration office had led me to realize what I should have known since my first visit. I had been in denial all along, but now it was clear. I would never be able to leave. I would never be able to take my children to freedom. My husband would move on and forget about his family. Why would he wait for someone like me? I was no longer the person he left. My hair had begun to turn white and my sadness consumed me. I could not breathe. I tried to save myself from the fire of pessimism time and time again, but it was no use. No one could help me. I had failed. As you can see here, I start to put together her state of mind on that day. Very important, again, to take readers to the various scenarios that we're trying to describe. So this is an important description, an aspect of introspection and also immersion. I think the two can be observed in that excerpt that I just read to you. Memoirs required immersion. As I said on this next section, we must create engaging characters, plots that engage readers from the very start, create suspension. These are all key elements of writing a successful memoir. I think writing, location, and time are essential to your best writing. You have to think about what places are you the most productive when you write, what places inspire you. For me, it may sound a little funny, I guess, but I like to write my novels at Starbucks. This became very difficult during the pandemic because all the Starbucks closed. Now it's been a year since the pandemic started and I began to write outside Starbucks. I figures the closest that I can be, still have my coffee or my tea, and get lost in the music that plays outside and see other people. It's something that for whatever reason, it gets my motivation to write and my creativity more in sync, I guess. I also like to write during river cruises. I wrote most of one of my novels, not most, but maybe 3 or 4 chapters of one of my novels during a river cruise in the southern part of France. I also wrote in other rivers of Europe. I love it. The concept of being able to see outside my window, see other communities so different with so much history than ours, while writing a story is something that really gets my creative juices flowing, if you will. And the other part is writing, the time that you write. Again, I don't know about you and what time is best for you to write, but I find that when I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't sleep, maybe around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, that's when I do my best writing. Sometimes I can write while watching TV, not always successfully. I mean, I have to go back and reread. But the writing that I do, particularly at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, that always ends up being my best writing. So those are details of things that you may want to observe as you write. Location and the time. Anyways, I thought this would be something interesting that you can take with you. In this slide, I will reveal some of the characteristics of character development. How do you create engaging characters? Here's some tips. You must reveal them slowly. As you know, the process of reading a book is one of discovery. In each chapter, we learn more and more about our characters or protagonists. And it's a very interesting process, and we have to enable readers to discover that character in a smart way, in a way that keeps them engaged. It is also important to take readers on an emotional journey. Those are the best memoirs. You need to make them interesting, all your characters must be showing some level of interesting information that keeps the reader engaged. You can use a variety of techniques such as thoughts, dialogue, appearance, the deeds of those characters. These are all very useful in character development. In order to illustrate this concept, I like to read part of a chapter on Waiting on Zapote Street. This chapter appeared on one of the literary journals for the University of South Florida. Again, I like to apologize. English is not my first language, but I'll do the best to read portions of this chapter. The chapter is entitled Abandoned, and the voice here is from my father. So I will tell you a little bit about his story. I was 9 years old when my mother, Maida, left me at an orphanage run by Catholic priests. It was the year 1946. When she and I walked into the building, holding hands, I didn't know what was about to happen. I caught a whiff of her perfume as she kissed my forehead. "You better behave, Rio," she said. She smelled like a garden of roses and violets, not strong. I didn't care for her perfume, as it always made me sneeze. She wore dark glasses and the black dress she had begun to wear after my father and brother died, 2 months apart from each other, leaving her with only me, her youngest son. She walked away without looking back, the sound of her heels resonating through the empty hall, followed by her words, "I'll be back later," words that lingered in my ears without knowing why. A hand touched me on my shoulder, and I turned. I saw a tall man, all in black, except for the white collar around his neck. He looked neither angry nor concerned. He told me to follow him and led me to the sleeping quarters, a room with about 24 metal beds distributed evenly on each side, 2 feet apart from each other, each covered with white sheets that hung down uniformly, and with a thin pillow at the head. Our footsteps echo on the tile floor as we walked, an echo I could hear everywhere we went. An antiseptic smell tickled my nose that made the room feel cold and impersonal, so different from the smell of freshly brewed coffee, oregano, saffron, and cumin at home. He pointed to one of the beds and in a hushed tone said, "You can use this one." I did not understand why I needed a bed. He then gave me a set of instructions, all confusing. I was to go down the hall, turn right, go down again and turn left. Another director will provide me with a schedule of chores and additional information. I didn't understand what was happening. Gradually, all became clear to me when my mother did not return. 50 years earlier, my paternal grandmother, whom I never met, had left my father in this place, which was called La Casa de la Beneficencia y Maternidad, or La Beneficencia, as most people called it. The massive building, the House La Beneficencia, was located in Old Havana, on an avenue called Calzada de Velascoain. On the side of the building was a large drop box, where an unwed mother could leave her infant and ring the bell to alert the nuns of a new arrival. This method allowed unwed mothers to conceal their identities. I miss my father and my brother. My father had been a high-ranking officer at the Carlos Prio Socarrás government. I would later tell people that my father had died in the line of duty. I thought it was a more fitting of the persona he had demonstrated to be as opposed to the truth. He died from a freakish virus that killed him in days. That in my eyes made him appear weak, the opposite of whom he was. A similar virus which caused dysentery killed my brother a couple of months later. It made me wonder whether it was true what people said in Cuba, There's nothing one can do to fight one's destiny. It is written. Where is it written? All I knew was that one day I was at a baseball game with my father and brother, and practically the next day I was in this place, just like that. Two of the people I loved most had been erased from existence. My father often told me that men did not cry or let their feelings be known, no matter how much pain was inside. Following his logic was not easy. Carrying it all inside proved to be a heavy burden. When I first arrived at the orphanage, I did not seek the company of other children. I attended school and mass, the school work and chores assigned by the priest and nuns, like mopping the floor, cleaning toilets, and primarily kept to myself. The priest told me to believe in a merciful God and showed me how to pray. Every night I waited until the lights went off. I hid under the sheets, hands pressed together over my chest, and prayed for my mother's return. It was either a whispered prayer, one that even I could hardly hear, or a silent one inside my head. I was not sure which method could be more effective, or whether my eyes had to be open or tightly closed, or if I had to switch. Once I tried it with one eye open and the other closed, just in case. It was the meticulous person inside me or the obsessive one. I did not want to leave anything to chance, not then. As months passed, I began to lose hope. I did not understand why God had abandoned me. I thought my prayers were answered when my mother reappeared 6 months later, after she had left me at the orphanage. It was Sunday. I was mopping the floor for the second time that day. I had mopped it earlier, but when Father Rogelio came to inspect my work, he told me that the floors were not clean enough. He lifted the great bucket of dirty water and threw it on the floor, causing a splash that sprayed my black shoes and white socks up to my knees. He told me to do it again, and to do it right this time, or I would have to spend the day cleaning. Father Rogelio returned and instructed me to put down the mop and follow him to the entrance. When we grew close, I saw my mother's figure in her black dress, and I noticed her dark glasses. I ran as fast as my legs allowed me, and I threw my arms around it. I recognized her perfume. I sneezed. It was the first time I had smiled since she left. She asked me how I was doing. I told her I didn't want to stay. I missed her and my room, my things. Can I go home now? I asked with exasperation and hope. She said she was only there to check on me. I was begging her not to leave me when she signaled to Father Rogelio. He grabbed me from behind, anticipating my next move. I tried to free myself from him by kicking and squirming. Please don't leave me here. Please take me home, Mama. In violation of my father's rule. Tears swelled and rolled down my eyes. My mother turned and walked away again without looking back. I stopped praying after that day, but I always dreamed about the day when I could have my own big family. I would never do what my mother had done and what my father's mother had done. I would always be with my children. In La Beneficencia, I was taught a trade. Early on, I had shown I was good with my hands. I liked to break things apart and put them back together. The priest noticed my abilities, and in addition to the standard school curriculum choices like math and science, they assigned me to work as a mechanic's apprentice. I learned how to fix all kinds of things: cars and motorcycle engines, bicycles, television sets. I was detailed, curious, and inquisitive, with a natural ability for understanding how the gods and machines work. The teachings I received eventually led me to become an industrial mechanic. It goes on, but that gives you a sense of the emotion, the introspection, the desperation that this character is going through as he's staying at this orphanage after he has lost his brother and his father. So again, it is that type of journey that readers could feel connected with even if they have not gone through a similar experience, but they can imagine being that child at that orphanage. What makes a good memoir? I tried to look for different articles that could help. This is one that I thought was quite interesting, so I summarized some of the concepts illustrated here. And this is an article written by Stephanie Chandler on August 4th, 2020. And she cites various key characteristics: universality, novelistic, with unfolding storylines, a mixture of scenes and narratives, and you saw that in the previous reading. A memoir is not a place to vent anger, rather it is a journey or a narrative arc. When we write, we must have the ability to make readers laugh and cry along the way. It is not easy to do that. You really must dig deep inside of you to make these feelings surface from you as the writer, so that eventually when readers read what you have written, they feel the same way. When writing a journal, you must believe in what you write. I remember several years ago when I decided that I wanted to write my mother's story, given the promise that I gave to her. And after she died, and I continued to work on this project, which, by the way, took me about 14 years. My husband, I remember asking me, he said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Who will want to read it?" And I remember saying, "I believe in this story, and I know that if I believe in the story, others will too." And that really drove me to continue to write and not to let any comments, anything that I heard from other people who have been writing and had bad experiences, deterred me from my purpose. It was also difficult to get other people to read what I had written. A very difficult process. However, you must believe. And I guarantee you that if you do believe, others will too. As I mentioned before, as you're writing, if you cry or laugh during a scene, others will do too. Again, if there's anything that I want you to take away from this, is that you must give it your all. You do not hold back as you're writing. Dig deep into you, and the results will be amazing. You have finished writing a wonderful memoir, and you may ask yourself, now what? But before I go there, I'd like to share a story of someone who reached out to me. They wanted me to read part of their story. They wanted to share the ideas that they had for the story, the concepts with me, to ask me if they thought it was a worthwhile story. And I asked them, "Do you like the story? Do you believe in the story?" And they said, "Yes, I do." So my question to them was, who am I to question the work that you do? I'm no one. So again, very important, please do not let others impact your work and what you do, and continue to believe in yourself. So now let's go over to the next section. After you complete your work, an important step is editing. And not just only self-editing. There has to be a number of processes that encompass the editing process. You may have, for example, a beta reader, a trusted friend who can be critical, who can read your work and provide you with ideas. I have one of those beta readers. They're amazing. They have provided me with so much useful information. And it is important as writers to listen to what our beta readers say to not let that affect our self-esteem, to use it as constructively as we can. And then after you do all of that and you have a better reader, then the editing process begins, and you always want to hire a professional to do it. I cannot emphasize how important this is. You want to establish credibility with your readers. If you present a good product, readers will come back and will continue to read your work. If you present a careless product, they will not return. So this is extremely important. I have done a lot of reading. I have taken creative writing classes at the University of South Florida and completed a graduate certificate in creative writing because I thought it was important as part of my craft to make sure that I understood all the elements of writing. And not only that, that was not enough. I have continued to read on my own, trying to improve what I do. It has been a process, and especially for someone like me, English is not my first language. Yet right now I'm finding myself writing in English and then using a translator to translate it into Spanish, which I find that interesting. So part of me believes that I live in a limbo of two languages, English and Spanish. What that has helped me is the fact that I do have a lot of different audiences, because not only do I have the English-speaking audience, but I also have people who would prefer to read stories in Spanish. So it has opened a lot of markets to me to be able to write in two different languages. And what I do for those who are interested in translating, I use the tools that are available in Word to translate documents, and then I reread the document myself, because usually the translator that comes with the software is not good enough. So I read it out loud. I speak to a family member who speaks the language well, and paragraph by paragraph, I perfect the translation. And once that is ready, then at that point, I engage a professional editor to do the editing piece. So let's talk about some of the elements of editing and some important reminders that you might already know, but you'll be surprised how many times I see someone who appears to be experienced in writing, and yet I find a lot of this type of errors. You need to minimize the use of the verb to be. Again, by doing that, it makes your prose so much stronger. Also, look through, read through, and remove most instances of that. If you don't need it, do not use it. You do not need to be redundant in the words that you use. Also, try to streamline your writing. Read a paragraph multiple times and think about it. Can you say it with fewer words? That's very important. This is a rule. Most adverbs are not needed. I do find that on occasion they're helpful. Just try not to overuse them. And as I mentioned previously, hire an experienced editor. It goes to your credibility. So I hope you found this particular section useful. And now we will go on to the next section. One of the most important things you can do once you finish your manuscript and it's already professionally edited, in addition to making sure that inside the format is professional, which is, I believe, the formatting inside the book is something that you can do yourself. However, do not do your own book cover. I would hire a cover designer to do it. It's made a world of a difference to me. Just to give you an example, the Pedro Pan Girls, and you'll see that particular book, that one was a #1 new release. Waiting on Zapote, also designed professionally. That one was an Amazon bestseller twice. like Finding Water in the Desert, also a #1 release. So again, very, very important that you pay attention to your book covers. Take a look at other book covers that have made it to #1 bestsellers and see how they look like. You don't want to copy the work of someone else. Of course, you want to have your own take on your cover and one that reflects the storyline appropriately. But make sure, again, that you're hiring somebody to do this extremely important part of the process. In terms of publishing, when you finish your manuscript, one of the key decisions that you will have to make is whether you will self-publish or whether you prefer to go through the traditional route. And I will go over the two options briefly. Traditional publishing, of course, you have to send your manuscript to various companies and hope that one picks up your manuscript. You're competing with a lot of different writers. There are many factors to consider when you select this route. One, of course, that if they select you, your reputation will increase. You might be considered for more awards. There's also potential media coverage and placement in some stores. Increasingly, we see that even independent authors have all of these things available to them. So clearly, the lines between self-publishing and traditional are blurring a little bit. Authors, however, might benefit from the reputation of a publishing firm, and that's very, very important. Now, the complaints that we hear the most is that some authors feel that there isn't enough marketing support and that basically end up having to market their own books. In deciding whether you want to go the self-publishing route, you will potentially have more profits from your sales. However, as I mentioned before, there is significant competition. One thing that I found helpful is the relationships that you make, which can make a book a success. I have been fortunate enough to have books that have been very, very successful. I have a growing number of readers from all over the world. But again, these relationships with various groups, the administrations of various groups, has proven key to the success. Of course, I can also capitalize on some of the work that I have done throughout the year, of the work that I do in the area, all the connections that I have in the area of Tampa Bay. That has helped me as well. If you decide that you prefer to go the self-publishing route, there are various places that you can consider in terms of where to publish your book. Amazon KDP is the one that I use, and I highlighted that one in Smashwords because I do use both. Amazon allows you to publish in paperback or Kindle. It is free. You can publish it for free. However, I would not use the covers, the free covers that the Amazon KDP provides. I think you should hire the professional, as I mentioned before, to do your cover. Something that I did not mention before that I'd like to go ahead and mention here, please make sure that you think about that title. Some people prefer to have others come up with a title, or at least get help from others when deciding on a title. That's going to be very important because if you select a title that is too long, that might not resonate with readers. You also want the title to reflect a little bit what the story is about. So again, that's an important consideration. If your title is too long, also when you are displaying your books next to the books of other authors, the readers might not be able to read the title. So be very careful when deciding on a title. I typically look at Amazon to see if my title has been used by other people before, because I don't want a title that has already been used for obvious reasons. Then Smashwords is another avenue that I use. What I like about them is only electronic. This is only for Kindle type books, electronic books. But what I like is that they distribute about many different platforms like Apple Books, Overdrive, Barnes and Noble, etc. It's also free. So again, to me, these are really good avenues. And then there are the others that I show here. And you can research these yourself online as you're considering which way to go. In the marketing slide, I will share some of the techniques that I have used that have proven really helpful. This is one of the hardest things that you can do, is to sell your own book. You must understand who your target audience is, and you need to explore different techniques. Readers will notice when you're trying too hard to sell. So you have to avoid overt selling. It doesn't work. Instead, you might want to consider softer, what I call softer techniques. For example, something that I've used often is to share an impactful scene, one that someone might read and might incite them to keep reading. I also use pictures that can help visualize the story, especially given the type of stories that I write. I write stories that are very personal. Many of them are based on stories from real people. In my first two books, which are both stories of my family, as I display ads, for example, I use pictures of my childhood and my parents, and it really has helped me sell many books. When someone can put the story that I'm writing with a picture of a real person, it really helps establish the connection. Also, research what groups to join. Not all the books are receptive to authors, others are. As I mentioned before, I have developed relationships with group administrators. That helps a lot. And don't underestimate word of mouth advertising. For me, this has been, I would say that maybe 20 to 30% of my sales come from this type of advertising. Your readers can be your best sellers. Just today, I received this very long message from a reader who decided to read all of my books in one weekend. I don't know how she did it, but she's a very avid reader, and I received a very pleasant notice from her. And imagine she's putting that in a site. She put that on a site that has about 80,000 people that read it. So you cannot pay for advertising like that. Also, create excitement to and after publication. This is very, very important. And I'm going to leave you with some conclusions and some ending remarks. Keep writing. The more you write, the better you will become. When you write, make sure that you place all of you, your soul and mind, into your writing. As I mentioned, if you feel emotions while you write a scene, your readers will feel it too. You must believe in yourself and the story that you're writing. It's great to use the feedback from beta readers, but that doesn't mean that you absolutely have to take what they say for granted. If you disagree, you might decide to go a different route. If you believe, your reader will believe. That concludes my presentation. I hope you found it enjoyable. Happy writing.